light on. How are we going?
Hey, well, and you?
Yeah, it's good, good. So I've got all these things hanging up behind there next to the window, sort of blocking. Okay, there we go. That might be a little bit better, I think.
You've got a little bit of a wire hanging over the top of the screen there.
Oh, yeah. I'll see if I can get rid of that guy as well. Sorry, there's stuff hanging all the wires hanging all over the place here. Okay.
Good. Otherwise, how's life?
Yeah, good, good. Yeah, things have been flat out. Yeah, we've had like quite a lot of new product actually, which is getting released. Yeah, now where do we want to take this sort of crossover as well? Because I wasn't sure which stuff. I don't know. I know you guys have the pills,
yes,
which are just. I think you're gonna. I don't know if you've just released them or they're just about to be released. Is that right?
No, so I released them about 3 weeks ago. And
3 weeks ago, sorry. Yep.
Yes, actually we got them sort of first week in January. And then obviously put them out. So, and we actually got our second shipment on the way. It arrives today, actually.
Oh yeah, great. Yeah.
So yeah, they're sold very well. You know, it's but you guys have been busy bees. Jeepers, I thought we were going to be talking about this, and this is the only new product. But I mean, I got an email from Grace a couple of days ago about some huge 8 kilowatt keg filling machine, and jeepers, I thought
there's a lot of commercial gear as well. Yeah. Well, we are actually in the process. We haven't said this publicly anywhere actually, but we are in the process of setting up our own brewery as well, I should say. So, you know, we're kind of like also for our own selfish purposes looking into more commercial brewery gear. Because we kind of will need that in the not too distant future, I guess. So now we're also starting to bring in a lot of stuff that we end up, you know, wanting ourselves, which is kind of our whole business model, to be honest with you. Right from when KegLand started, it's always been, oh, what home brewing gear do we want to use ourselves? And then, you know, it's like, how can we make a business case out of that?
And obviously making money.
Yeah, exactly. It's worked well so far. So we'll keep sticking to that model, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I must say, I mean, this poll's just been absolutely brilliant. I mean, hats off to you guys. There's obviously a big team involved in this thing. This wasn't just a couple of people.
Yep. Well, I think the really exciting things are yet to come. I think for me, the pill's a great standalone device, and I think there's already other standalone, you know, devices like this out there. But I think the really exciting thing is the interconnectivity between this and the other things on the RAPT family of products. So one of the reasons why I wanted to put a lot of time and effort into keep updating a lot of the software, and you probably would have noticed with the pills now, we've already had like, I think we're up to firmware number 6 or 7 or something like that now. We've sort of got quite a lot of firmware releases, which are frequently getting updated because we want to be able to really automate the brewing process a lot more for customers. And I think it'll make it really a lot easier for them in the long term. So we've got things like our RAPT fermentation chambers, which have come out a little while ago. And in the very near future, the pills will speak to essentially the fermentation chamber. So when you're setting profiles, you know, that for your fermenter, and you want to, you know, set a profile for the temperature, instead of it just going up and down, you know, depending on time, what we'll actually take into account, and one of the key things we'll take into account is fermentation velocity. And really, when you think about what you're doing in the fermentation process, like if you look at a large brewery, what they're often checking is they're sending somebody out into the brewery, usually one of the juniors, to just take recordings every single day, get out a folder, right on the side of the tank, you know, how many gravity points it's moving, and look at how much it's changing every day. And that number is the most, it's not what gravity is it got to necessarily, especially for new recipes. You don't know how far it's going to ferment out. It's how much it's changing every single day. And that velocity is really going to enable us to automate the temperature profile. So instead of saying, you know, go into diacetyl rest after 4 days, which we don't know if it's a good time to go diacetyl rest or not, it's when you start to, when that velocity or that gradient on the graph starts to slow down like this, that's the ideal gradient at which we want to start going into things like the diacetyl rest. The other thing is when we want to crash chill, when the fermentation's over, you know, it's when that gradient starts to really peter off to it's almost horizontal or pretty much horizontal. That's when we know we want to crash chill. So that type of stuff means that if we have a profile which takes into account the gradient essentially of the or the fermentation velocity, then somebody can literally, they can get a yeast strain, whack it into the RAPT portal and say, look, I've got this particular yeast strain. I've never done this recipe before, but because I know it's the Verdant yeast or something like that, or I'm using USO5 or California 001, WLP 001 or whatever it is, they just say, I'm using that yeast. We know what parameters will work best for that yeast style, and somebody can just completely leave the entire fermenting process up to do it itself. So I think that's sort of a really exciting thing to be able to do. And because all of the major or the larger RAPT products, things like the chamber, we've got the new Brazilla, which is about the Brazilla Gen 4 is about to be released as well. That will also pick up on and work with other devices as well, which is kind of exciting. So if you look at the, if you look at the Brazilla here, yeah, this is the Brazilla Gen 4, which is just going to be released very, very soon. Now, in the past, let me just put this on my seat here so I can sort of see a little bit easier. Maybe I'll shuffle this over here like this.
Okay.
So, there's a lot of changes here. I won't go into heaps of detail because I'll leave some things for the actual release. But, when you're going into a product like this, one of the problems that we always had is when the malt pipe is down inside the brewery, everyone knows that all these single vessel breweries work in a very similar way. They take a temperature reading down at the base of the boiler where the elements are. And that's great. It's like it works fairly well because it prevents us from overheating wort and caramelizing wort down there, which is important. But really, it's not the target temperature we're trying to get to. What we're trying to get to is a certain target temperature inside the malt pipe, which we don't know. It's a mystery unless you actually get a probe. If you get a probe and then measure it. So a lot of people get a manual probe, put it into the malt pipe, take the temperature reading, and then that way they'll go, okay, yeah, I'm almost at the right sort of temperature that I'm aiming for.
Yes.
But it's a lot smarter now that we've got the controllers on all these RAPT products. They can pick up on things like Bluetooth beacons. So what we'll have is these little temperature probes, which are basically they've got a little display on the front so you can see the temperature and use it like a conventional temperature probe.
Yes.
However, what you can do is pull out the cable, the waterproof cable, put that into the top of the malt pipe, and that way when this is down in the boiler, you can set on the controller, you've got a Bluetooth beacon signal, and you can pair essentially this probe with the controller. So what it will do is it will turn the elements on, taking into account the temperature inside the malt pipe. So that way you'll have much smarter control, being able to use both the probe in the boiler to stop yourself, caramelizing wort, but also, you can force the brewery up a little bit higher in temperature to get to that core temperature that you're wanting to achieve inside the malt pipe. So, it's really all this interconnectivity between all the devices, which is the most exciting thing about, the RAPT products that we're bringing out. And I think that's probably one of our greatest advantages, I suppose you might say, as a manufacturer of a lot of this gear. There's certainly individual competitors which are making one-off products, but I think for us to be able to bring that together and have those products talk to each other and have one common platform where they all work, I think is kind of the most exciting part of it for me, I guess.
Well, you actually answered, because that was going to be one of my next questions to you was, okay, we just talk about this whole RAPT thing, because I noticed when we actually started selling these pills, guys didn't really get the concept that this is just one product in a whole family of products that are being launched. So I'm glad we sort of spoke a little bit about that, because obviously, I mean, that allows other options like that separate temperature, the RAPT temperature controller that's been released now. How much integration will the pill have with that? So in other words, could you drop this pill into your fermenter? Let's say you've got a temp twister in one of the conical fermenters. Will the RAPT pill then say to the controller, listen, warm me up, I'm cold, or cool me down?
Yep, absolutely. At the moment, what we've got is a pairing function. So if you go onto the RAPT portal, you can pair, for instance, the fermentation chamber with the RAPT pill. I've actually got a new temp controller just next door. I'll grab that because you guys probably haven't seen it before yet. So I'll just quickly grab that one. So I should have got that before. Yes, these are the new RAPT temperature controls. Now, this is, I'm in Australia, obviously. So in Australia, we use these types of power points. We've got like the Australian socket, but obviously we change them for the various different countries. But this is another RAPT product where it's going to, it basically, at the moment, it connects to Wi-Fi straight away. But with the next firmware release for these, this will also pick up on the data for Bluetooth beacon as well. So if you're using the RAPT pill, what you can do is if you're only using Wi-Fi, you can have the pill connect to the Wi-Fi directly. So it connects to your router, I suppose, and this will also connect to the router. And then when you go to the portal, you'll see both of these data, the data streams from both will be overlaid on that graph.
Okay.
So that's one thing you can do. A second thing you can do there is you can turn off the Wi-Fi on this and use Bluetooth only. So that's another thing. If you're using Bluetooth, the pill will last much longer in battery life. At the moment, we've done all the optimization we possibly can on the battery life for the pill. So we're actually extended it. When we first released the pill, we actually said it had a 3 or 4 month battery life, I think, I can't remember. But if you've got the latest firmware release, actually the latest firmware release means that you can go up to 1.5 years on one charge. So it already is quite long anyway, to be honest with you. And that's taking telemetry readings once every hour. So we're going to also allow people to get more frequent, because the battery life is so long. We thought, well, maybe we should allow people to actually get even more data so they can check, they can actually upload their telemetry via Wi-Fi every 5 minutes or 15 minutes. So we're very likely on the portal going to bring down that threshold to very low, so people can get. And it's not, for a lot of beers, it probably doesn't matter, but for very fast fermentations, the start of the graph at the moment, it's sort of like a bit sketchy. So you find with more data points, it actually gives us a much nicer graph in the portal. But as I was saying, if you turn off the Wi-Fi, you'll extend the battery life of these to be many years if you're only using Bluetooth. And then a device like this can pick up on the Bluetooth iBeacon and then relay that up onto the portal and package that data up together. You can also use that data from the Bluetooth beacon to then change the temperature of the heating and cooling as well.
All right.
So that way you can have it all work together. It'll probably make sense if one day, maybe on the next meeting, I'll do a share screen and show you how the profiles work and show you how you can set up different alerts for various things, or fermentation velocity and stuff like that. But yeah, that's sort of a really, really exciting sort of combination of features. The other thing you can do is other really cool stuff. So what we've done is we've got like NTC. So for instance, on the temperature controller, we've got a standard NTC thermistor. So this particular thermistor, it's able to take temperature readings pretty accurately from -20 up to 120 degrees Celsius, right? So that's kind of handy. But if we use other probes like this, with beaconing probes, you can buy the one box, but then let's say we wanted to control. A lot of our customers are into meat smoking and stuff, for instance, or they're into pizza making or something. Let's say we've got a meat smoker, right?
Okay.
And the meat smoker, we want to set on, I don't know, 200 degrees or something pretty hot, like an oven or something like that. What we could do is we could use a temp controller, which is not really on its own designed to go up to 200 degrees. But what we could do is say, pair these two devices together. So pair the Bluetooth probe, and this has got the probe lead on this one is made of Teflon. So we're able to go up to 420 degrees on this. So what you could do is use the probe from the Bluetooth beacon device, pair it with the controller to use the controller to control the turning on of an electric element or an oven or something like that to heat up to those temperatures. So then I can use this to control the core meat temperature of a smoker process or something like that. So like, I think there's heaps of other stuff that we can do once you've got these types of devices picking up on Bluetooth iBeacons. There's heaps of into product sort of connectivity. You can also sort of eventually venture out of the intended purpose for a lot of these devices to use it for even other quite useful tasks.
So what that means is once your brewery is now up and running, you're going to be opening a steakhouse as well soon.
It's funny you say that. We've got a little bit of a competition in the office where we're trying to make the best brisket. So yeah, we'll see how we go. It's quite possible. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we talk just a tiny bit more? I know you don't want to give too much info away about that
Yeah.
brew, but I've had a million questions from guys. So just two or three quick ones. One of the most common ones was, how much of a big price difference are we going to see between the older Gen 3.11 and the new Gen 4?
Yeah, well, one of our core values as a company is we've never wanted to overcharge for anything that we sell. We try to do everything we do really efficiently, whether it's manufacturing or distributing or getting the product to our customers. So we're not going to price gouge just because it's a new item. But the reality is there are some, things which cost more. Having a full color screen on the display, for instance, having all the Wi-Fi controller and stuff like that. We've decreased the watt density on the elements even further. They were already one of the lowest watt density breweries around, and now they're even lower watt density. So by pushing the size of the element right to the absolute limitations we can in the base. But I think, it'll be maybe, it's hard to know what it's going to work out at a retail level, but I know our cost of manufacture is sort of increased by probably $20 to $30 more. So how that'll result in an end retail price once you add, the various different, wholesale distributor markups and stuff like that will probably increase a bit more than that. But the other thing is, as we also start manufacturing larger batches of them, because we've got a lot of people wanting the Gen 4 overseas as well, we have to still wait for the European CE approvals, and we've got the UL approvals in the States and stuff like that. But once all those approvals are all finished up, then we'll be able to increase the production size, and then hopefully will come down, and then so you'll probably find the first ones will be a bit more expensive, but then it'll come down as our price and cost of manufacturing also comes down. We generally pass that on straight away.
So I see the other thing is, now I know that I've actually lost a couple of sales on that, and I see you guys have fixed that. On the older Brewzilla, obviously you had the control panel down at the bottom, and to be truthful, that sometimes can be a bit of a pain. Whereas now, I see, obviously with the new one, I see you can even lift it off and move it around. So it's a very comfortable machine to work with.
Yeah, so it's basically got on the controller, you've got this this frame here, which basically, if you undo these bolts here, if you loosen them, sorry, these are done up pretty tight at the moment. So it's got a couple of nuts here. So if you have them just a little bit looser, you'll see this frame here will be able to move up and down. So depending on where you're standing, you can actually tilt the controller at a more ergonomic angle where you can more easily see it. But you can also lift it off completely and then, use it like this in your hands and stuff like that, almost like a, Game Boy controller or something like that or something. So you can do that. Actually, one of the other guys wanted us to program a game onto the controller. So if we get really bored, we might do that. You can play Snake on here or something. I don't know, but that's basically how the controller works. All
right. Okay. So we're not going to give away too much more. I know. Just one last quick thing. Obviously, the sparging system is different on that.
So we have changed. They had to change a few things. Basically, we made the malt pipe quite a bit big. You can actually probably see. I don't know if you can notice there, but the malt pipe's longer. And what we've done is we've really tried to optimize the malt pipe length, because we found a lot of guys were actually doing quite high gravity brews, and some guys were actually using, even though it was a 35-liter boiler. You might be aware we brought out a boiler extension where you put the extension on top and you can actually extend the brewery size. And those extensions have sold really well. A lot of people who bought the Brewzillas previously, because they were backwards compatible as well, a lot of people were extending the size of the boiler, but then they were like, oh, I really want to get more mash tun space. So what we did on this brewery is we pushed the mash tun as low as we possibly did. We made the screen at the base, the legs on the screen a little bit lower, so that brought the screen down. So it's given us another few liters of mash tun space. So you should be able to fit in another couple of kilos of grain in there. So if you're filling that malt pipe up and you're using the boil extender, you could probably get away with doing a double batch in the 35-liter one. So most people call a batch, say 20 liters. So you're getting, about 40 liters out of a batch if you're doing a standard 5% alcohol beer. So that's also kind of exciting. People can get a little bit more out of the unit. Obviously, you can't just keep extending it infinitely. You eventually get to a point that the heat loss, is too great, and you're not going to get a very active boil. The elements at the bottom have changed quite a bit too. Like, if you look at the base in here, you'll notice that the take up is bottom dead center, and the base is actually got a dish, so it drains out completely. You'll notice that the base actually drains out like this, so you can suck absolutely everything out of the boiler. And yeah, we still use the screen which sits above the like a false bottom screen to protect the pump. So yeah, that's always worked well. It's always been one of the advantages of the Brucilla is the false bottom screen in there, because it prevents a lot of pump blockages. But because we have that screen in there, there was really nothing holding us back from, other than the tooling and having to change the element design and having essentially a dish shape element fused to the bottom now. So that was sort of a bit complicated in the tooling, and it was hard to find a manufacturer to cast a new size element for us, but we eventually got someone who was happy to tango. So we basically got that done. And also that means that the plumbing on the underside is quite different too, I should say. So if you look on here, you can see if you just flip it upside down, you can get to the pump straight away. So you can see there, you know, even if you did happen to get some type of pump blockage, you can get to you just flip it upside down, and there's no, because the electronics are all in a separate enclosure under here. So all the relay box and high voltage stuff is under here. You can get to the pump really easy, undo a few clips, and you could, you know, take the head off the pump, for instance, really easily. So that's the same design with this open base that we're using on, yeah, the Brucilla 35, 65, and the new 100-litre unit, which will also be coming out in the near future.
Interesting. So the actual overall diameter is the same as on the older versions. So in other words, those extensions will fit, whether you've got a new one, old one, extensions will fit.
Yep. Yeah, the external dimensions are the same. Yeah, you might find a few things just a little bit different, because now we've got that bottom dead center takeoff at the base. There was no reason to have the tap penetrate through above the element. Yep. So yeah, that's sort of, now you see, if you see this, that tap on the older models used to be up here on the boiler body, but now it's actually underneath the element. So it's actually taken off from a lower level.
So you've just split the bottom take to one to obviously the pump and one to the actual.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And that was one of the other reasons why I wanted to make the plumbing really accessible, because some people probably change the plumbing too. Like, you know, we intend to brew in a certain way, I suppose. So we've actually got this particular, the stock standard is so it sucks from the bottom, goes through the pump, and then it pumps out of both the ball valve and then up the arm. So if you turn the valves on and off, that'll direct which flow it's going to use. However, some customers will probably say, look, I want to just gravity feed out of the side tap rather than go through the pump. Therefore, you know, if I was to block my pump, I'd have that redundancy and be able to turn the tap on and still drain it out of gravity if the pump's completely blocked or something like that. So you can easily get to the plumbing, switch over one T-piece, and then you basically got to reconfigure the brewery to a different plumbing setup. Okay. So yeah, I think that sort of flexibility might suit people.
We're definitely looking forward to seeing that. I mean, I think I'm going to stop there now and leave a little bit more excitement for when
Yep.
So, yeah. I just need to get back to this quickly because I've had a couple of questions and guys that have asked me to ask you things. So let's just talk quickly a few smaller things which I found guys have had. One of them is that they don't get their battery display coming up. And I've always informed them, look, you haven't charged the unit correctly. Is there any other reasons for that? Or is that purely just?
Yes, there is. Yeah. So when you get a battery and that board, you need to calibrate the two together, right? So basically what we've got is you have to charge it, you know, really 24 hours. And then what happens is the board itself picks up on that and says, look, you've been well and truly charged. Whatever voltage you're at now is the absolute maximum voltage you're going to get to. And then it will say, I now know what 100% is. So then it can calculate what all the other rates are. The other thing I should mention is you have to register and connect this to you have to register it to you first, if that makes sense. Because what it does is it gets that data and attaches that data to your particular login on the RAPT portal. So that's something that's really important. They follow. Yeah, we've written sort of an instruction manual, sort of a quick start guide, I think it's called. It's important to follow those steps precisely. I can't stress that enough. If you sort of do something different, or we have some people sometimes if they type the wrong MAC address in or something like that, it's basically they find a problem. But you have to register the device, and then you have to charge it fully, and then it knows for that device that's registered to you, the battery is fully charged, and it will attribute that particular MAC address and that fully charged calibration figure, to that device that you now own. So that's quite important. If you just charge it fully and then register later, we are going to make some extra code to fix up this little bug, because we did realize this was an area where if somebody was to charge it fully and then registered later, technically it could remember that calibration figure on the device. So we're saving that on the new firmware, which will release for these, that'll be saved in the non-volatile memory. That way, when you link it up, it'll remember what the calibration figure was. But for the time being, if you just make sure you register it first, then fully charge it to calibrate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then obviously a lot of guys are asked, when are we going to start seeing some of the other functions like Bluetooth, like integration into Brewfather, the norm. I'm sure you've been asked those.
Very, very soon. The first Bluetooth beaconing devices which will work will be the brewery, and that's happening. The good thing is nobody has to purchase anything extra. So if you're buying the pill now, the Bluetooth function will be available as we release the next firmware, because we have to, for that to work, we have to update both the firmware in the fermentation chamber and the pill. And similarly, we have to, so for every different combination of devices, we have to upgrade basically the firmware on both sides to make sure they're all, talking in the same language, I guess you might say. So the brewery will be done very, very soon. And then with regards to the pill and the chamber, probably in about 8 or 10 weeks or something like that, we'll probably have the firmware finished for that next firmware upgrade. And then for the temperature controllers, that'll be after that at some stage. You don't have the exact date, but once we've done those two, to be honest with you, the temperature control box has very, very similar firmware to the brewery and stuff and the fermentation chamber anyway. So it's a very easy device. So once the fermentation chamber and the brewery is updated, probably in maybe 2 to 3 months, the temperature controller firmware will also be updated.
Okay, and I suppose, obviously I've had a lot of guys with grain fathers, but I've just been telling them, look, just buy a new Gen 4, just solves all the issues.
Yeah. It really does. To be honest with you, the Grainfather's done a good job of updating their brewery, but I sometimes get the feeling that since the change of ownership, they seem to be more interested in selling more of the consumables, to be honest with you. But look, it's hard to say. I don't know what their business direction is, to be honest with you, and we don't often talk to the management over there either in the States. So
So, all right, so basically the Grainfather guys, we're not going to see too much integration there with between the pill, for argument's sake, and
it's very hard to, like, in order for us to get full integration with someone like the Grainfather unit, like for us to do integration, we really need to have some control over the firmware on the device, and they're not likely to want to work with us. Seeing they probably see us as a substantial competitor, I suppose. But with that said, we are doing integration with Brewfather in terms of the Brewfather software, so there's Grainfather, obviously the other units, but then there's Brewfather, the software provider, to draw a distinction between the two. So Thomas Gangsoy is a very, very talented programmer, and he's been an absolute joy to work with. He's very fast, and look, his user interface is fantastic. So anybody out there who's looking for brewing software, I would say 100% go to Brewfather. It's the best of all the people in the office here. We all use Brewfather because it's sensational. So we released a public API not that long ago. So if you're already using some of the RAPT devices, I would encourage you to look at that. I think within 6 hours of us releasing the API for the RAPT devices, we already had people jumping on the forum that we had and Facebook group, and they're posting up images of them, basically getting the results from the pill and then feeding that up with the Raspberry Pi, and then having a little screen display, on their desk showing what graphing the gravity of the beer and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool that I think a lot of guys can make all that stuff now. We we did originally plan to release the API at the middle of this year when we finished doing all the other stuff, but yeah, we were getting hassled by so many programs and stuff like that. We just sort of folded on that one. So we just, yeah, got that API out a bit earlier.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I think, I mean, other than that, is there anything else you'd advise guys with these pills in terms of maintenance, looking after it? You know, any other advice that you can give guys, you know, rather get it out now and
not really. I think that just about the only thing I would say is wherever you know, do charge the unit, charge it somewhere where it's got Wi-Fi, because as we come out with all the updates, you know, we want everyone to have the latest firmware on there with the best features. So yeah, if you're using it, you know, in one room of the house with no Wi-Fi, and then you bring it inside to charge it where you do have, you know, and there's no, sorry, if you're using it where there is Wi-Fi and then bring in the house where you don't have Wi-Fi or something like that, it only checks for firmware updates when you plug it in, and you've got to make sure where you're charging it, you have Wi-Fi, and that way it'll always be updated with the latest firmware. Everything else is, you know, there's not really much to break here. The battery should last you ages. You hardly ever have to charge it anyway, and the silicon should last ages as long as you've got a little bit of lubricant on there. Look, that's about the only thing, just a little touch of lubricant. In the video that I made of the release of this product, I also showed you how to screw both halves, and with little, if you put a texture mark on here, you can always make sure you screw both halves up to the same degree, because that is something that we noticed will affect your gravity. So it'll put your calibration out. If you screw this up really tight one day, and then the next day you have it, you know, about half a turn slightly undone, your reading's a little bit off. Actually, another thing is worth mentioning, if you've got a really high Krausen fermentation, sometimes you get a few bits stuck on the top. So it's every now and then, sometimes it's not a bad idea to also, if you see that, if you've got a clear fermenter and you can see what's going on, and you see that happening, give the fermenter a bit of a shake like that, and you'll notice the beer will kind of wash over it and kind of wash all that crap off it, and then you'll get better readings again. So look, that's another little small tip I suppose I could throw in there.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah. And then last quick question for you on this. Is there any sort of merit in doing a 2-point calibration on higher ABVs?
I just don't. The single point calibration is pretty damn good. So yeah, look, it's up to you guys. Like you can do it. I tend to think it's not necessary. And you know, the reality is, if you're, you know, if you were off by a couple of points in gravity, you're still going to get a pretty damn precise ABV reading, firstly. So for ABV perspective, you know, it's so accurate anyway. I think you don't really need to do these really super, you know, accurate calibrations. And the other thing is, the really smart data that you want is not the precise gravity anyway. For a lot of the time, you're looking for gravity change. And whether it's, you know, the single point calibration, or if you go in the advanced calibration mode, it'll still give you that change. And that's really what you look, as I was saying right at the start of the video, it's the fermentation velocity, which is one of the most interesting bits of data. And soon we'll have that as a separate overlay on the graph, so you can actually see fermentation velocity on top of the graph. So, you know, because of those things, I just think it's not worth the extra time myself, but we just wanted to include it in there because, you know, some people thought they might need it. And there might be some other applications, like some people might, for instance, with, you know, like maybe somebody wanted to, you know, leave it in that, like it'd probably make a funny distillation parrot or something like that. I mean, you guys are into distillation over there. So technically, if you chuck this into a high percentage alcohol, at the moment, it'll just sink. But, you know, you could actually take the weights out of here to make it lighter, to make it float in alcohol, and then you could get a digital parrot reading essentially. But that would require you to take the weights out there and do a completely new calibration process and put a new formula in there. So, you know, we wanted to make sure those types of features were there for those. I mean, we already know we've got a lot of geeky nerds out there who are our customers who like to play around with stuff. So that's why it's in there. But look, for 99% of the customers, honestly, the basic calibration mode, it's all you need.
Okay. And then obviously in terms of guys using this for very high sort of gravity watts, obviously this chart just immediately, once you've popped it in, if they've got say a 16 or 18% or whatever, there's no sort of real limit on that, I assume. It will go as high as before.
Yeah, what you'll notice, so the pill, what happens is the pill, we've basically chosen the pill to have the most resolution over the most common gravities, I suppose you might say. So basically, you know, it's very unstable at the range of beer gravities. When I say unstable, that's a good thing. So it's unstable in the sense that with a small change in gravity, when you're going for, let's say, you know, 1020 to 1030 or 1030 to 1020 or something like that, that's right in the sweet spot of the types of gravities we're arranging. There's a large movement like that, is what I'm saying. So that's what we mean by unstable. When you get into the very, very high gravities, you'll notice that the change is much smaller, like this.
Right.
So the resolution of the accuracy is not going to be as good at those high ends, but you'll still be able to get a reading out of it, and it will still feed you that information back. So, you know, they'll still be useful, they'll still be good enough, and, you know, arguably all of those high gravity beers, they eventually get down back into that same range that we want to measure, and they're the more important. It's not, the starting gravity is, you know, not even so important for the decision-making process, because you're generally starting at a temperature. It's that, but as it's getting towards the end, that's what we're really paying more attention to. So it's more important for us to have the sweet spot of that resolution at the, you know, at the more common ends of gravity, which we're more interested in.
Brilliant. Key, well, hats off to you guys. Hats off to all the engineers, to everybody that was involved in this. I mean, this is absolutely brilliant. I think the whole concept you guys have got going here is just fantastic, bro. So I'll look forward to another chat to you at some point. I think we got our temperature controllers. They should be on the production line, or we'll certainly make sure that that's on the way soon. And then obviously that boy behind you is what we're really keen on getting at.
Yeah. We'll get them out as fast as we can. There's a bit of a fight for stock at the moment. Yeah.
Well, okay. I mean, we got to wait for you guys to get it tested on that side first anyway. So I suppose it's a couple of 2-3 months probably at least before we get to see that.
Yeah, that's it. We always start with the Australian electrical approvals first, and then because we bring it out here first, and then the electrical approvals in all the other countries, you know, generally follow after. So yeah, I'm sorry that you guys can't always get as soon as we get it here, but you know, we do it as fast as we can once we release here.
No, brilliant. Anyway, hats off to you guys. Keith, thanks again for chatting.
No problem.
Brilliant. I mean, guys love getting info out of you. So thank you very much.
No worries.
We'll chat
pleasure.
again.
Yeah.
Enjoy your beer. I know it's what, 5 o'clock there or something now, I think.
It's pretty much hit beer o'clock a few minutes ago, so I'm gonna get stuck into it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Keith, thank you.
Nice one.
Okay.
All right, no problem. Yeah, cheers.
Cheers
okay,
again.
Thanks again.
Okay.
All right.
Ciao. Bye.